A warm greeting to everyone present here. I'm Simran Kaur Saini, and I'll be presenting my research titled These Step Wells and the Shifting Scapes Adaptive Reuse of Baolis of Delhi. So, I think before we move on, it is quite imperative to note how humans and environment have shared complex relationships over a long period of time. So, the socio environmental changes, as well as the formation of varied cultural symbolism over the past, are also intricately connected to the present and the future of a community. Therefore, a nuanced understanding of the past and contemporary interactions with the environment may provide a concrete solution to the concerns of the future. In all of this, archaeology and its interactions with the space have been an important tool of analysis of the human past. Stepwells here have been a part of the long tradition of water structures that existed in the Indian subcontinent as far back as 5th century CE in order to meet the consumption needs of the people. They not only met the utilitarian function, but also were a significant part of their cultural realities. So, during the course of this presentation, I'm going to look at how, in an age of increased environmental change, archaeological research can provide a window into how the concerns of the future can be tackled through an interdisciplinary study of the environmental past and present. And with that, let's move ahead. So, a bit of a background to what this whole project was about. This project was conducted under Speaking Archaeologically, which is an archaeological education group based in India. We started this project in December 2019. It went on till March 2020. Unfortunately, due to the outbreak of COVID, we had to stop it. During the course of this project, we wrote many blogs. We documented around 12 Baolis in Delhi extensively. I wrote a research paper on that and also made YouTube videos in order to popularize these Baolis amongst the common masses. So, what exactly are these step wells? So, in common parlance, these would be traditional water structures consisting of a set of steps leading down to the earth in order to harness water. They are known as Baoli, Baudi, Kalyani, Pushkarni, and so on in various parts of the Indian subcontinent. If I have to look at Delhi specifically, which I am going to do, these Baolis start to emerge around 12th century CE. We also notice a shift in location of these water structures in Delhi. So initially, they were in urban centers, which were near the Yamuna River. Then they shifted to the ridge region, and then they finally came back to areas which were near the river banks of the Yamuna River. We find these stepwells near cities, near roads, or near sacred spaces. Extensive restoration of waterworks also took place around 14th century CE. We do have records of Iltutmish actually commissioning such restoration works. Now, what exactly is the significance of stepwells? So, if I have to look at the utilitarian sense, these met the domestic needs of the people, provided them with an all year round water supply. In the socio cultural context, these were places for gatherings, they were imbued with a religious meaning, and they were also places for rest for travelers. So, coming to this table in front of you, I have 12 Baolis which I analyzed here before you and with their basic details so that we get a bit of a background. Looking at the structure of a step well, as you can see in the diagram before you, you can see that there is a set of steps that is going down. So if you might have noticed, there are two major components to a step well. There's a well and there is a tank. So the water from the well will flow into the tank through the way of a small opening. The tank also has small openings which would let out excess water. We also find pavilions on the side walls. So these might contain chambers or arch colonnades, so as to speak. The structure also narrows down with growing depth. These were mostly made in rubble masonry. And three types of Baolis can be found in Delhi. So we have the L-shaped Baolis, which is your Red Fort Baoli. We have the circular Baolis, which is your Firoz Shah Tughlaq Baoli. And we have Baolis with the single set of staircase, that is your Rajon ki Baoli or the Nizamuddin Baoli. Now, because we are talking about scapes, it is quite imperative that we also look at the geological terrain of Delhi. So, in the map before you, you can actually see the location of the various stepwells that are there. Now, historically, the topography of Delhi consists of natural streams, basins, and ponds along with the river Yamuna. While the climate was characterized by a dry hot summer and a dry cool winter with rainy seasons in between. The landscape is also characterized by ridges on the western and eastern edges, which are basically the northern extensions of the Aravallis. The southern ridge area, especially, is quite abundant in groundwater resources. You also have to look at the salinity levels in these groundwater resources, which are quite high in the west and southwest region of the ridge, while it is low in the high areas of the ridge. In the present scenario, as you can gauge from the chart before you and the map before you, the groundwater level has drastically declined in Delhi. The Yamuna River has very low levels of dissolved oxygens. All of this can be attributed to the sporadic urban development that the city of Delhi has witnessed in the recent few years. There's a heavy concretization which has actually reduced the catchment areas for these water resources. We also find high levels of nitrate and fluoride in the water as well. So, now that I have sort of covered the basics, let us also look at what are the structures like right now. So, all of these points listed before you are interconnected in a sense. So, I'll start off with the first one, which is rapid urbanization. As I mentioned, the city of Delhi has witnessed a sporadic development. So, Baolis like the Gandaki Baoli are heavily encroached upon by various houses, various shops, and so on, ultimately leading to some of the Baolis being locked off to the common public. There's also loss of community purpose. So, for example, except for the Nizamuddin Baoli, where people still imbue it with a religious notion, none of the interviews with the locals yielded any significant sort of a link with the sites. There's also a significant amount of vandalism, as you can see in the photo before you. That is the Rajaon ki Baoli, where you can see some very beautiful inscriptions written by the general public. There's also littering. You find plastic bottles, organic waste just litter around. Half of the sites do not even have trash cans on there. We also have environmental threats. So the Lohar Hiri, for example, has a severe case of efflorescence as well as algal growth. There's also heavy vegetation cover in the case of the Hindurao Baoli. So you can barely manage to look at the site there. There's also lack of awareness about the structure. So the foremost Baoli in Delhi, the Anangtal Baoli, we could not cover that because none of the locals were aware about its existence. Even the Google Maps was not aware about its existence. So that's how bad it is. And there's also a case of overlapping jurisdictions of different authorities. So you have the Delhi Development Authority and the Archaeological Survey of India kind of being confused about who gets to protect which site. So, finally, coming to the three major questions that I want to address through this research. First is how human environment interactions manifest in the context of built heritage. The second is to understand the significance of stepwells in the economy of tomorrow model. And the third is to understand how interplay of community participation and adaptive reuse in the conservation of stepwells and the environment plays out. So, what exactly is adaptive reuse and economy of tomorrow? As we have seen, the water scarcity problem is quite rampant here. And it actually brings about this great need for a sustainable development of the community, which would entail a maintenance of balance between social equity, fulfillment of basic needs, and conservation of natural resources. And as we have seen, and as the economy of tomorrow model persists, heritage is quite instrumental in ensuring sustainable usage of resources as well as in generating economic capital. And here is where the adaptive reuse actually comes in, which may be defined as changes in the functions and the structures of a building in order to suit the needs of the present. So, what exactly is the way forward? How do we go about conserving these Baolis? So, as I mentioned, adaptive reuse. So, these Baolis can be seen as sources, sites for water harvesting, especially at a time when we are going through a water crisis in this very city. But is revival of stepwells really an option? Because we have seen the catchment area has been reduced drastically. drastically, and we really can't put additional stress on many of the groundwater resources. So, this actually brings about the question that the documentation of the ecology is quite important while we're looking at how a specific site has to be reused. So, will it harness the groundwater resources, as in the case of the Hindura Baoli, or will it harness the rainwater resources, as in the case of Tughlakabad Baolis, which have very low levels of groundwater resources? We also look at urban regeneration. This project was quite successful in the case of Nizamuddin Baoli. So the Aga Khan Trust took this project back in 2008, and they involved the local community extensively in the conservation of the Baoli as well as the surrounding historical sites. So this was a sort of a holistic development there. And this kind of a model can be employed at Baolis such as the Hindura Baoli, which are in the midst of an urban settlement right now. Uh, Cases of adaptive reuse can also be seen in the case of the Red Fort and the Purana Kila Baoli, which are currently being used to water the surrounding lawns of the historical complexes. So, some ideas can be taken from those Baolis as well. uh, Role of the community is very, very important, because at the end we really do not want to just conserve the site, we want long term preservation of the site. And if the community is not made a major stakeholder in that, the site really won't survive, actually. And this leads me to the last point, which is ecotourism. Giving the community some leverage, giving the community some employment opportunities in order to be an active part of the same, in order to ensure their own socio-economic development while ensuring the preservation of the site. So, what did I and my team do during this project? As I said, we wrote blogs, we extensively tried to interview the locals there. We also released a series of YouTube videos, and I wrote a research paper in order to make sure that these Baolis come in the light of the concerned authorities and the common public. And with that, that is the end of my presentation. Here's a list of selected bibliography that you can look at in order to get a more clear idea about the whole topic. I would really like to extend my heartfelt gratitude to Ms. Shriya Gautam for her immense support, and my team, Medha Sharma, Diptarak Datta, and Ratan Kaur Renu at Speaking Archaeologically. Here's also a link to my academia profile where you can have a look at my published paper in order to know more about it. Thank you very much.